Our technology team is really focused on making it as easy as possible to be integrated with anything. So at the end of the day, if you want it in a format X to put it into your proprietary system, give us a week. We'll put it into that format as an exfil, and now you got it into your special common operating picture, your special notification system, whatever you want.
Thousands of companies show up to sell their technology to the U.S. Department of Defense each year. But so few will transition from proof of concept to true production across the valley of death. The select few who do, their stories are rarely told. Until now. I'm Noah Scheinbaum, and this is Crossing the Valley. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Logan Selby and Kevin Larrabee. Logan's an Army officer, the CEO and co-founder of Datashapes AI, and just an all-around great guy. He's building one of the most robust signal processing solutions in the market. It's called Global Edge, and the platform is about making radio frequency, or RF signal, more useful. And they've got applications ranging from defense and national security to the football field. Kevin is Datashapes' head of product. He joined the team after 20 plus years in the Army, where he served as chief data officer and in a variety of technical leadership positions for the big Army. Their story, the story of turning scientific breakthrough into commercial success, is one you're going to want to know. So enjoy my conversation with Logan and Kevin.
All right, everybody. I am psyched to be joined today by Logan, the co-founder and CEO, and Kevin, the head of product at Datashapes AI. This is going to be a fun conversation, guys. You are doing some amazing work, and you're doing it in your own way, and that's what we love on this show is people cutting their own path. So thanks so much for taking some time to be here.
No, happy to be on.
Yeah, thanks. Well, sweet. Let's start with, for those of our listeners who may not be familiar with Datashapes and may have not visited y'all down in Charlottesville, what's the company all about?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we are an AI company. So we're focused on software-only approaches to electronic warfare, signals intelligence, really any type of signal in the electromagnetic spectrum. We're focused on finding those, classifying those, telling the operators on the ground what's going on so they can make decisions in real time.
Also, classifying, not in the government way.
Not in the government way. So identifying.
There it is.
There we go.
Yeah. Just got to be clear here. This is not about sticking more and more behind that skiff wall.
No, not at all.
Fantastic. And you guys are, I think part of what's really interesting about this company is you guys started with intellectual property. There was a real innovation there. So talk us through the founding insight, or what was so special about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we have a lot of history in our IP portfolio. So we currently have 21 patents for the company. So, a large for a smaller, earlier company in the defense space. We initially were kind of birthed out of Silicon Valley, did a lot of work out of Stanford originally. So some of our key engineers that are still a part of the team came out of the Stanford ecosystem. Really focused our IP initially on solving hard problems in waveform analytics, is what we call it, but really a waveform, the way we describe it, is any kind of waveform that exists in nature. So think of like a cardio waveform. It could be light, it could be vibration, it could be acoustics. Any type of waveform was how we built our engine to process in real time. And so our initial target was in healthcare and big pharma. And so how do we solve the problem for big pharma was how do we solve real-time analytics of like heart tissue for new drug interaction testing. So I'm a big pharma customer. I want to try a new drug. I got to test it against cardio tissue to see how it affects the heart. How do you do that at scale? So our software came in and allowed them to be able to analyze multiple tissue samples at scale, and then provide that real-time analytics to electrophysiologists and all those scientists that are a part of that process. And that's where we really got our start. So built a company around that. And then fast forward a little further in time, we started to see a little bit of decline of our usage of software in that space. Not due to it not working, but more from the story we're told that can't be quoted. No, they won't quote it, but we were kind of finding too many anomalies in that world. And so it's kind of disheartening, but it's okay. So we made the pivot to defense around 2020, 2021. We really said, defense is an environment where waveforms are prevalent. There's a lot of use cases in defense to do real-time analytics of waveforms. And so that's really where we pivoted. And then the progression led us to what's the most prevalent waveforms in defense that have, where there's a big capability gap. And so electronic warfare and signals intelligence were really ripe for the picking when it came to real-time analytics. And so that's where our focus is today.
It's a really unique story. I can't move off this point, though. We're going to have to double tap on that. The pharma industry didn't want you to continue working there because you found too many anomalies.
That's the story we were told. So like I said, we never got the direct quote. We couldn't quote anybody, but that's the story we were told. We were finding a lot of anomalies in the data. And obviously, these big companies are looking to make a profit off of new drugs and things. And so when you find problems, that means less drugs progress. So, so that's the story.
That's a little bit more than mildly horrifying. I'm going to put that one in a box because I think otherwise we're going to spend the whole episode digging deep in big pharma. And Kevin, you probably wouldn't have joined the if it was totally focused on big pharma.
Yeah, probably not. No.
How did you, let's bring you into the story.
Yeah,
how did you get connected with these guys?
Yeah, so I just retired from the Army this past summer after 21 years. I was a field artilleryman, was a data scientist in the Army, had a great career. And during my transition out of the Army, was talking to everybody. Was talking to venture capital folks, was talking to big DoD firms, small consulting firms with a data science background and 20 years of military service. Kind of do a lot of things. So I was trying to figure out my next path. I bumped into a venture capital firm, had met Logan, and said, "You got to talk to this guy, Logan. He's got something really big coming up, huge. He needs somebody that's spent some time in the tactical trenches, kind of building tactical data science solutions, machine learning, and software." And so I connected with Logan while I was still in government. Had a couple conversations, and then as I was transitioning, I was ready to pull the trigger on kind of a bigger company as a more of a classical director of AI.
Sure.
And Logan said, "We got this big thing going on. Join the company, take on as a head of product, and we're gonna scale big." And so that was really a little bit of a uncharted territory, but something I was extremely pumped to jump in. Had a little experience with the Defense Venture Fellowship before I got out, and so had that experience. Kind of got the bug for that startup mentality. Built and scaled an internal startup in the government.
Yep.
And so I had this kind of itch to continue to build, continue to add value, and this electronic warfare space is just data rich, and I think there's not a lot of data scientists in the space. And so as I started to kind of pull that back, I said, data, hard problem, great challenge, huge need. It kind of met all the requirements. And so, so started in June of 24, and we've just been getting after it ever since.
That's awesome. And kudos to you, because it is real. I know it's hard, especially, thank you for serving as long and as well as you did and leaving a military career. I know there's temptation to kind of find a stable, safe kind of thing. Not that you guys aren't stable and safe, but the startup path historically has not been, the greatest magnet. I think that's changing. Shout out to the Defense Ventures Fellowship and Shift.
Yep.
I think they did a lot of work to change the culture around this.
Huge, yeah.
Without that fellowship, I don't know that was startups high on your list, kind of before that.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah.
It was definitely an idea, but it was something that was a little too risky. And I think, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but the venture-backed approach that Datashapes has taken, I think, gives you a little bit more confidence, gives you a little more of that base of a board that knows how to scale into these industries. And I think that is, just in a great team too. You're having that confidence in the technical direction, the product direction, and then, having the personalities to really kind of jump in and start getting after it. So really excited to join the team.
Yeah, no. So Logan, the overlap between pharma, life sciences, and defense, other than being highly regulated industries and having some high tech talent, there's not a lot of overlap in terms of the talent sets in people who know how to sell to one or the other. So what was that kind of process like with your team and with your board to make that kind of pivot?
So when we pivoted, we really shifted to, a lot of the team that still kind of existed at the time were pure software engineers. So it wasn't, it was more of needing to feed them use cases versus having to retrain them.
Okay.
So we kind of retained a lot of that talent. It was more of a, how do we take this and then pivot it and bring it into this use case and really develop those use cases so they can understand to build against it.
Yep.
So that was really the path there. There wasn't a lot a hard reset we really had to make. It was more of just really paint that picture for them so they can build products or take the products we already have and then reorient them for defense use cases.
So kind of the go-to-market function was young enough or small enough that you could do it without kind of totally overturning the apple cart of the organization.
Exactly. Now we've attrited, I would say, some of those folks over the years that were kind of more involved on that side because not that it wasn't a fit. It was just more of a, maybe they were more driven by those use cases. And so we've attrited some of those folks. We still have some of the early people on the team as well, but a lot of that team kind of moved on, and now we've built more defense-oriented, defense-minded type folks that are really pushing the product forward.
You got to stand for something, and if you stand for something, some people opt in and some people opt out.
No, exactly.
That's part of the growing experience. When you guys first started looking at the defense market, talk us through what did first contact look like? Did you guys go the cyber route? Was it another R&D thing? What did that process look like?
So we kind of took the opposite approach. A lot of companies look at the cyber approach. It's kind of an easy button for folks that don't have connections in the DoD or understand a lot of the use cases at the ground level. So, like Kevin, I have a defense background as well. So still a reserve officer in the Army. So on the technology side, so I see the direct capability gaps that exist daily. And so I knew exactly where to kind of insert this. And with folks like Kevin, we have some other defense-minded people on the team too. We saw, how to take a different approach. And so we like to call it a success sandwich in the office. And so where we're really trying to go affect those end users. So we go directly down to the warfighter themselves, get our technology in their hands, let them use it, and then go try to capture that program executive office or those program managers, try to bring that horse to water as well, and then make them meet in the middle, because that's where the contracts come. So that's kind of the process we're taking. A lot of companies too, we call it the Boston Marathon. So, with the Boston Marathon, in order to run in that race, you have to do qualifiers. You have to go qualify somewhere else. And so the same thing kind of exists in the defense space, where on the defense side, you have to do a lot of operational exercises. You have to get your TRL level, so your maturity level up. So they believe that you have a capability that's advanced enough to be used operationally. And so that's really where our focus was originally, was how do we get ourselves inserted into these operational environments, or these, to qualify these qualifying events. And so that's really where we were focused on over the last couple of years, is really getting in those exercises, getting our products into the end user's hands, getting that real-time feedback too. So, maybe our product wasn't perfect, but it gave us that feedback from the person that's actually going to use it in the field, to then go back and iterate and make it better, to then, getting us to that qualifying event, which is contracts. And so that's where we've really been focused on doing that type of work and working directly with end users, and then also with your OEMs, your prime contractors. So a lot of big programs, a lot of big contracts already exist under those behemoths. And so how do you build partnerships with them to enhance their capabilities, because they're looking for that too. They want an edge against, one prime wants an edge against another prime to win a larger contract. So how do we empower them, enable them to go after those contracts by bringing in our capability? So that's kind of the third leg of the stool. So I would say there's, the going to direct to the end users and PEOs, going to the primes, the OEMs. And then our third leg of the stool is commercial. So doing some dual use work too. So you're providing, real-time examples of how your technology is used in the wild on the commercial side, which a lot of times defense end users want to see that too, because it's another validation.
That's a lot all at the same time.
It is.
And I know there's different schools of thought, even from, hey, one product, one customer, crush that, and then move on to a second customer and then a third, and then start a new product. Even from a product perspective, Kevin, how do you think about building product that serves all of these use cases? Is it like a 80% solution and 20% glue code, or what does that look like?
Yeah, maybe before we get there, I think, one of the things that we haven't really talked about is, the Department of Defense is high on trust, right? It's always been like that because of the mission. The Army's mission, I always like to say, is, to really close with and destroy the enemy, right? At the end of the day, that's the Army's mission, and all the other services have similar missions, but there's high trust in that chain. And I think it's starting to reflect really in the technology development cycles too. They want to bring on these high innovation companies, but you have to meet the gates of the trust chain to validate that your technology is not, not doing what it's supposed to do. And it's really false advertising, right? They want to kind of kick the tires. They want to build trust. They want to get it into these training events to really have the soldiers, actually use it, deploy it, and then validate that it's doing what it's supposed to do. So I think that we're starting to see that more and more, across the DoD, that, there are these qualifiers, but the qualifiers are really a trust-based exercise that you're a fit, the product's a fit, and the customer is giving good feedback on that fit. And then the contracts will come if all of those things kind of meet that end state. So I think that's kind of what we're doing on our product side, really is, getting into the user's hands, finding, capabilities that the end user is looking for. And really this electronic warfare, signals processing, domain spectrum dominance is kind of the global arching term. it's a really complex environment. And I think, sometimes that's kind of just allocated to those EW experts to say, just figure it out, do the electronic support, right? And everybody else kind of washes their hands and says like, oh, that's the EW job, or that's the SIGINT job. And they kind of say when I need them, I'll pull them over. But Spectrum is starting to become kind of it is a military domain that every maneuver commander needs to understand with high fidelity. And that's what we're seeing in our products is, getting it down to the end user, but also how does all that data coming off of the electronic warfare spectrum get to the commander for decision and action, right? And like getting back to the so what is really critical to understanding how does it function, how does it work, how does it do the things I need it to do, whether that's in a mobile state or if that's in a static state, or whether that's deployed across a variety of different sensors or on one big huge sensor. All those things matter to get back to the mission, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what our products are really getting after. I think we shouldn't simplify technology all the time, but in this very complex world of Spectrum, trying to simplify to get to the so what is a really critical component of how we're building.
Simplification, I think, is hugely helpful, not only from a build. I mean, this is like the Elon engineering process. It's not just Elon, but the engineering process of like what can be deleted, but also from a sales process. Like, go explain this like huge behemoth of all this complex patent stuff. It's like, idiots like me who don't have any technical background have no idea how to like really engage with that. So the extent that you can kind of like speak to outcomes and things,
right?
That's the difference, which is actually a great segue. Yeah. So let's talk about some outcomes. Like what are the ways in which your technology, when you guys deploy, how is it changing ConOps or mission outcomes for, we can pick one user group. You don't have to name them, but I'd love to hear like how you guys are actually employed.
Yeah. So I would say, in the special operations community, it's very much, you have they call it the hyper enabled operator now, so they want those operators to have as much information as they can to make decisions as fast as possible, because, at the end of the day, you have, they're utilizing the kill chain methodologies, and it's trying to close with and defeat the enemy, but while preserving life on your side. So how do you take care of yourself? And it's really boils down to information. So what can I know as soon as possible to make that next decision? What's around that corner? And so that's where, we're seeing a lot of our adoption is really in that kind of ecosystem. Is those hyper-enabled operators want that information. Mm-hmm. So we're able to boil it down into the very easy way to understand, and we're giving it to everybody. Where in the past, it's only been given to that EW expert or the person that's classically trained in that art, which is usually somebody that's went through a lot of coursework, understands physics, power, spectrum, density, that type of stuff. Now we've boiled it down to whether it's just an alert that comes in to say, hey, this is what's going on, or hey, there's a drone around you. Hey, there's a surface area missile system near. And depending on the echelon that you're operating at, we're providing those real-time alerts. And that's where that adoption is really coming in, is because we're able to make it ubiquitous because it's software. And so how do you get it on every soldier, every vehicle, every drone? And so now all of those are federating between each other, so everybody has situational awareness across the battle space.
That's pretty cool. What's the substrate? Is it a heads-up display, or is it like ATAC?
So ATAC is one of the mediums that we're pushing stuff in. So ATAC, with the Army uses EWPMT-X is their new system. So we're integrated with that. Really, any type of common operating picture. So that's the other, being software only, it's extremely flexible. And so our technology team is really focused on making it as easy as possible to be integrated with anything. So at the end of the day, if you want it in a format X to put it into your proprietary system, give us a week. We'll put it into that format as an exfil, and now you got it into your special common operating picture, your special notification system, whatever you want.
That integration piece is so huge, and it's the difference between like a company that has been around that actually understands kind of like how the operating environment works versus the point solution founder who's like, I built this really cool thing over here. Now you guys figure out how to integrate it, right? So from like a actual deployment perspective, what does that look like? Is that included if you guys are selling, I don't know, software licenses or whatever the kind of the actual business model is services kind of a part of that? Is that a wraparound or an add-on, or like what's the model for deployment?
So right now services are included. So we sell license-based is, I would say, the majority. We also do so software only is a hard concept for a lot of people, and so we're trying to connect the dots as easy as possible for the defense community. And how we found how to make that easier is showing up with a piece of hardware, even though we don't like to do that.
Yeah.
But showing up with a piece of hardware that they can buy.
Yeah.
And so we've started doing that as well. So we can do a deployment with, commercial off the shelf sensors. Or, we've partnered with another prime or another non-traditional contractor that has a piece of hardware that we can integrate with. We'll go and sell them that if the customer wants that. It's really kind of a la carte. So what do you need for your mission specifically? And we can integrate our software into any of those types of hardware devices. So it's, I would say the majority of our model is really based around licensing. But now in order to connect those dots, we're kind of taking a little bit of a different approach, even though we want to stay software only. But so we can sell hardware as well to kind of connect those dots.
So it's kind of like sell the solution,
essentially,
the whole thing together. As
we still have the product. I mean, we're still a product company, so having products that are specific, but then just the integration, I think, is more the solutioning there.
Do you think it's possible to be a software only company? Like, is anyone doing it well right now in the defense market?
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably some ebbs and flows. I think in certain mission sets, I think it's still really hard for the DoD to really think outside the box on that last step of the integration, right? There's just the technical talent, unfortunately, just isn't there in all the ranks to actually deploy, integrate, update, change. Like they're looking for commercial companies to support that. So when you come with them with, hey, I can give you a license to this, they say, on what? And we say, on legacy hardware, right? And they say, well, that's not cool. That's not exciting. That's not like the next like visionary thing. And so by showing up with some kit that can do and can function, with that kit, I think it's really helpful to kind of connect the dots, like Logan was saying. And I think, some of the trends on compute and hardware we thought would be going smaller and smaller and smaller. We were at AUSA, 10 days ago, and people are still holding on to their massive server racks, right? Yeah. And it's kind of natural, bigger, better, right? And I think what we're starting to see is nobody wants to carry that. The tactical warfighter at the edge is like, don't give me any more hardware. Let me use my ATAC device to do as much as possible. And so that's really where we're kind of focused. And our software is, CPU optimized, not GPU optimized. So we're able to, ride on lots of things, but really trying to harness that, reduce the cognitive burden on the end user by just giving them examples of different things that they can run. So we're running on a Raspberry Pi, right? With a commercial SDR. We can go end-to-end solution on that. We can put our software on some compute that can be attached to a DJI drone and fly it in different places. I think the mobility aspect of what we're doing is completely unique in that you can put it on any kind of form factor device and really, deploy it in different ways. And we think the mobility aspect and also the stationary, use cases really start to add a lot of flexibility to what can happen. We heard a story from some Ukrainian partners that said, hey, during the late fall, early winter, there's 2 feet of mud in the Ukrainian, the eastern side of Ukraine. So, and we said, well, how do you maneuver? And they said, well, we have to use drones to do everything. So, we like that concept of spectrum reconnaissance with our software attached to a drone flying and detecting signals kind of, across that, forward line of troops. And I think some of those use cases start to kind of spur a lot of creativity. And a lot of our end users say, man, this is a game changer, right? Doing stuff, in a mobile way that can add like a whole different dimension to the battle space really, really changes the fight.
I think it's a really, really, really crucial insight. And it doesn't mean, I asked the question obviously deliberately to be provocative, but I think there's something to be said for, look, if the government knows how to buy hardware better, it's like, well, you could start there and prove out the concept and kind of get them comfortable. And then when that operator goes and they're in another environment, they don't have that kit. And I say, hey, can you put that thing that did that on this? And then it kind of, they'll do your work for you in that way, right?
Well, exactly. Or you demonstrate that capability on stuff that they purchase hardware from us, but then it's saying, hey, we can put this on everything you have. So now, because, like I said, we federate it all together. So now you're putting us on, attritable sensors that are leave behind. You're putting us on more exquisite sensors that are all interconnected. Now on an overhead drone, even larger collection platforms that are high, mid altitude, aircraft. So now you have complete coverage of the spectrum everywhere versus one big sensor.
It makes a ton of sense. What's the accreditation process for that look like? Can you just get one ATO that covers it on every device, or is every every time you deploy it on a different piece of hardware, you need to be reaccredited.
So it really kind of boils down a lot to the network that it's writing on.
Yeah.
And so, there's kind of, several different networks that we're leaning into.
Seven or several?
Several. Yeah, probably seven. But
More than seven.
Yeah, might more than seven, but several. And so, the kind of how we took the bite of the small bites of the elephant on that front was, small disconnected devices are on local area networks. So if you're using like your ManNet, your mesh networks that are forward, they're not necessarily touching a DoD network. And so that's a lot easier to deploy on to get that validation, to get the traction, the adoption at that level. And then it's a little easier to start moving into those ATOs with larger platforms that are on DoD networks. So that's kind of the path that we're on. Currently working with some groups. So for different types of sensors on different things in different areas, going through those ATOs. So that's a challenge, though. I don't think.
What's the average time for an ATO for these bespoke networks?
So, I mean, you probably have more experience than I do.
Yeah, I think on the tactical side, I think it's really kind of commander dependent, right? Mm-hmm. Certain commanders have certain authorities to actually accredit things and push it on the network, and they take their own risk profile, through that. I think as you scale further and further up to TS networks, it gets more and more stringent. And I think there's some commercial partnerships that are trying to help with that process.
Yeah.
But I think it really comes down to like the battlefield need, right? And I think we're seeing things move a little faster on the battlefield side, those local area networks and controlling at kind of the node level. And I think that's been really helpful kind of for some adoption use cases. But, I think, where we're at today, we're not pursuing that hard of the ATO to those secret networks and TS networks. The federation, I think, needs to happen where the actual, tactical decisions happen. And I think that's kind of the critical finding with a lot of the use cases. The end users are kind of pushing back on, hey, we need this like today versus in 3 weeks, right? And we need to know initial triage of this data that we're collecting to like take the next steps for the next operation. And we can't wait 3-4 weeks from other 3-letter agencies to push down insights. But we need to do it today. And I think as, Ukraine is, we're watching Ukraine every day, and we're seeing lessons learned on the EW side of Ukraine, how they're deploying various different defensive, offensive capabilities. And it's just becoming more and more prevalent, in a modern battlefield.
Mm. Yeah, I'm reminded Brett Gramberg and Nini from Vannevar Labs were on the show not so long ago, and one of the things they talked about was finding a commander's top 3 priority, and like not being number 6 and not being number 10, because if you're really not cracking those top, for exactly what you're talking about, is you do need that kind of lightning bolt strike of no, we need this, we needed it yesterday, get it done. And I think we've all seen examples of when, this is where you talked about the sandwich strategy. You need that top 10 champion who can reach down and say, no, we're going to get this thing accredited because we need it. And if you're just lower on the list of priorities, it's not going to happen. It's not worth the expenditure of effort. So no, that's pretty cool that you guys have been able to kind of split that. And it sounds like in a variety of different environments. And so where are you guys in this journey today? I'm so curious. I mean, it sounds like you are in many different fights in many different places, and you kind of came in without going through the traditional kind of like RDT front door potentially. So like, where are you on the journey to becoming this, behemoth program that can't be moved from the department ecosystem?
So I think, I think we're still early in our journey. And so we've gotten some adoption. We've, through the Boston Marathon trips that we've ran over the last couple of years, we've gotten some access now to some larger programs, which are forthcoming, which is exciting for us. And so that's going to kind of springboard us even further with higher adoption. But right now, we're trying to get more penetration. I would say we're more focused on the domains versus the services. So, we're providing, proving out use cases, at the tactical level, but we're also getting kind of a barrage of use cases across every domain. So in whether it's space, maritime, we're kind of getting use cases all over. So versus like targeting a certain service, we're kind of targeting the use case as a whole, and then going out into those services that have that direct need for those use cases. And I feel like it's a little more, at least the reception we get is a little more tangible versus this going after, I'm going to go to the Air Force, I'm going to pitch this product for exactly what we're doing, but I'm coming at it from a use case perspective saying, hey, we solved these problems for you, and let them paint the picture themselves. So that's been kind of the approach, and I feel like that's gotten it's gotten a better reception because it's a little different.
That is different.
And we bring a kind of a good group in that has a lot of different experience and expertise in different areas, and so we kind of handpick the teams that are going in to talk to these people based on experiences we've had and capability gaps we currently see, and that's very well received. Plus, going from the top-down approach, so having a an executive buy-in at a higher echelon, kind of coming down, and I call it softening the objective. And so for us before we walk in is super helpful as well. So kind of putting all those things together is kind of where that success is started.
Tell us a little bit more, if you're willing, about what that actually looks like. So your go-to-market function is not necessarily organized, but you don't have account execs aligned to the services.
No.
And you're doing all right. So lay this out if you're willing. I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So we do. So our kind of setup when it comes to like BD sales is really aligned to the function. So electronic warfare has. So we have an individual that retired out of the Army as well, but an electronic warfare expert, and so he's kind of not just focused on the Army; he's focused on the use cases across services. So the joint fight, because that's the future. The future is a joint fight. It's going to be large scale combat operations in a joint environment. So how do we affect that?
Amen. But are they buying that way yet?
So we're finding that it's starting to happen.
That's awesome.
And so
That's really exciting.
Penetration for us has really been a lot on the Army side though initially, and I think that's due to us being able to speak that language. So we're currently building the team to kind of bring in that expertise, but still not focused on the services. So how do we need somebody with a little more expertise, maybe just in space, but space pertains now to every service. So you have folks in the Army doing space, Air Force, Space Force, Marine Corps. And so how do you kind of lay out those use cases for those end users and they speak the same language versus, hey, I was captain in the Air Force, or I was a major in the Marine Corps. It's more of like, hey, you understand this because we speak the same language from a use case perspective.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we're laying out the team. We're really targeted. We're hand selecting every single person. It has to be a quorum for the entire team before we bring somebody on. So still very hands-on approach when we're selecting these people. We're looking for people that have that joint experience though, because that's beneficial. And so, maybe you came out of the Army, but like, Kevin was in a joint billet in his last tour. And I myself has worked both in a joint environment and in a NATO environment. So I understand how that works as well. And so finding those people that have that background is critical, to the kind of the way we're approaching this.
Yeah. It is a unique, I've not heard really that approach laid out before. It's great that you guys are pursuing it. And it's even cooler that you're getting traction with it.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good sign, not just for Datashapes, but also for the department and for the ecosystem.
Yeah.
If we can start living our way into some of those stated values, that's probably a pretty good thing.
Yeah, for sure.
That's exciting. When you all think about where you go from here, you talked a little bit about layering commercial in.
Yeah.
You just touch on that for a minute. So you left the pharma side, heavy on defense. At what point did commercial kind of pop up on the radar, and what sort of work are you doing in that sphere? How does it complement the defense side?
Maybe I'll take this. I think we know defense takes a little while, right? Like I was talking about the trust exercises, right? The trust falls, right? Like to make sure like we're going to be there. We've got good, strong tech. We're going to solve all these different problems. And I think we're getting that traction. But I think, as we look to commercial use cases as well, there's also validation from the defense side to say, oh, you're working with XYZ company. Oh yeah, I subscribe to that, or I know those guys, or I've bought from there before. And I think there's a little bit of symbiotic benefit to having that dual use approach. And I think there's also you're commercially viable and defense viable, and you understand both sides of the coin. I think that gives you more validity. And so I think, some of these commercial use cases come very quickly. And, you have to be, product wise, you definitely have to be ready to go and be prepared to solve that problem, right? You get a couple of chances, maybe two at best, until they're off to the next vendor that's going to provide that. And so, we feel really strongly that we're prepared. We're ready to take on some of these different, drone detection is not just a DoD problem. It's a commercial problem, right? That there's all these commercial, drone, users that are, trying to take cool pictures at, college football stadiums, right?
Sure.
Things like that. And they're in violation of various laws. And so we're seeing that there's a lot of dual problems shared by both defense and commercial, but they come up quick, they pay well, and it's an exciting opportunity, right? And so we're kind of seeing that critical infrastructure, a huge problem with Spectrum, commercial use cases, and then just the security side, and also just crime prevention, but also user experience is another kind of a whole domain of people stepping on each other during a broadcast. That's a really bad day, right? And it just kind of like diminishes the quality of the production. And so these are different use cases that are kind of happening, and Spectrum really poorly understood by the public. But when it happens, there's like that was a problem. That was an issue. I didn't like that, right? And I think those are the things that I think are starting to emerge on the commercial side when it comes to Spectrum. There's exponential growth in the amount of signals and things that use the spectrum to communicate. And we're seeing lots of value that we can provide kind of in that real time, every sensor kind of being distributed across a different area to be able to do really exciting things like direction finding of signals, right? Those kind of use cases are really starting to kind of emerge on the commercial side.
Because you hear, in the defense world, we always talk about contested environments. In a battle space environment, it's going to be contested. We're going to be dealing with an adversary that's advanced in the electromagnetic spectrum. So how are they going to make the environment contested? On the commercial side, we deal with congestion. Because of the exponential growth of uses in the spectrum, everybody has a phone. Everybody has a device that they want to connect. IoT is huge. So now you go into these large venues and you're starting to have customer experience issues because they're starting to be too congested and they're conflicting and stepping on each other. And so that's where commercial industries really started to reach out to us, which has been interesting.
That's
we're
an
kind of
interesting pull,
and so now they're talking to us about how do you help us solve this problem? You're obviously doing it for the DoD. That's a large validation for us because you're solving a hard problem for somebody that needs it. But how do you solve that problem in a commercial environment for customer experience? And that's something we were expecting. But they're like you said, they're coming at us fast, and so we're kind of jumping on these opportunities.
It sounds just like a moment of crazy growth on a number of fronts for you guys, and these are not like it's one of these markets where you don't see that slowing down anytime soon. There's not fewer devices getting introduced. There's just more by the day. So I can imagine an exciting and yet stressful time. What do you think the next couple of years look like for Datashapes?
Well, so what we talk about a lot, and we're talking about this now, but I think the evolution of our company is really focused on data, because at the end of the day, we're taking the spectrum and turning it into data that you can use. So we're making the spectrum usable, giving you information about it that makes sense. And I think that's our growth path, is really focusing on the data side of things. So again, being software only, we're using hardware to kind of get our entry points in there to get some of the traction. But I think the future is really focusing on the data side. And we're an AI company, so we love data. And so how do you use that as your kind of springboard forward in the future and really go after, what types of data are in these user experiences, and how do we utilize our AI to affect that versus just kind of monitoring and detection and things like that? How do we actually add some cognitive layers to what we're doing to make, make decisions, make the AI make decisions for end users to make their experience even better. And so that's kind of our growth trajectory is really on the data side.
Yeah, and maybe I'll add on to that. I think a lot of people think, Gen AI, kind of a huge boom last 2 years, unstructured data, right? Predominantly.
Yeah.
As structured data, as we're collecting event-based data streams, it's all structured data. It's all classical SQL, right? But, Gen AI can also do a lot of really interesting things with tabular data. And so how does Gen AI with tabular data in the RF spectrum start to really explode, where people can ask this data all kinds of questions, right? And so questions that we could not even imagine are going to be the next evolution of kind of the Gen AI approach to, if you can collect it, structure it, manage it, and then ask it the right questions, that's kind of the full gamut of capability that people are looking for. All right. And I think it all kind of stems back to, Logan's point on data, but the data features, the metadata, what kind of things could you potentially ask of it kind of in this kind of time series RF like approach, which is really kind of starting to get, really exciting and dynamic, for all these different use cases. And if you set up all the plumbing correctly, then the magic can happen kind of at the other end. So, that's what we're really, really excited about. And I think the other thing that we are hardware dependent.
Yep.
But as hardware gets smaller and smaller, compute gets smaller at the edge, we're going to be able to do a lot more persistent stare kind of across the entire spectrum. So from 0 to 40 gigahertz, massive swath of spectrum, being able to persistently stare and then provide anomaly detection, change management, visualize that kind of in real time, to really answer and solve some hard questions. I think is going to be kind of the future of where we're moving.
Right at the heart of the joint operations, the CJAD, C2, I don't know what we're calling it these days, but connect everything, right?
Sure.
So no, you guys are right at the heart of it. That's an exciting place to be. We're just about at time. I'd love before we wrap here, as you all look out at the ecosystem, at the industry, at all the young bucks coming up and the other companies kind of in the space, I'm curious if you have any reflections on kind of you shared what you're excited about with respect to your company, but what gives you kind of hope, excitement, and joy about the industry writ large right now?
Yeah, I mean, over the last few years, I mean, we've all seen it. The defense tech space has kind of exploded. I mean, it's getting larger and larger every day. I think it's becoming more mainstream. You've even seen, we're pretty involved on the academia side as well. So you're starting to see a lot of academia even getting involved with defense tech now.
That is a big change. It's like
it
a
is.
return to what it used to be.
Exactly. So that's exciting. I think there's a lot of opportunities for companies that maybe didn't think they had a defense application to potentially pursue it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, your combat arms, your people that are affecting maneuver on the battle space, that's a portion of the Defense Department. But also people forget about all the enablers that exist across the Defense Department too. So there's applications really from A to Z where any company that's doing something could potentially have a defense use case that they could come in and affect. And so I think maybe not being afraid, not being intimidated to come in and try to join the race, I think is, I would kind of challenge any founder that's out there that has any type of new technology that's innovative to take a chance, because there's likely an end user that needs some help on the defense side. And there's likely a place for you to get a bite of the apple.
Feels like an industry that could benefit from the competition.
Exactly. And we need it, as we're pursuing these potential, hopefully not, but these potential conflicts with near peer adversaries, we need, it's an all hands on deck moment in our lifetime, so it's like we need as many people in this race as possible. That's all, rowing the boat in the same direction.
Absolutely. Anything I can.
Yeah. I think, fortune favors the bold, right? And, there's a ton of people going to listen to this and think about how can they make a difference in the world. And, sometimes that taking the easy path sometimes will lead to goodness. But I think there's such a great opportunity in the defense tech space to bring your passion, bring your love for technology for a warfighter that needs it, right? I think a lot of warfighters out there will say, dude, I don't need AI. I just need a database that can automate the transactions of my job and make it a little easier, right? I just want a little bit of insights and help me get to my digital transformation on a personal level, right? And I think there's some goodness in take an old problem and apply a little bit of technology and a little bit of AI to it, and it can go a long way. And there's a lot of those problems that are still out there that the defense department needs to solve. And I think, I think it'll be appreciated by those warfighters that signed up to serve our country in a time of uncertainty, just like all of us join in a time of uncertainty. But I think, in this time and kind of this modern battlefield of near peer adversaries, it's super important to get involved, to take a small step towards solving big, hard problems. And, I think there's a lot of those problems out there. And we definitely need the talent and energy and excitement to jump in. So I would say, take that first step, get involved. There's so many great dual use technology use cases. I would say go for it because there's a huge requirement that's needed for our warfighters out there.
Amen. If people are interested in your use case in particular, or your technology in particular, your company, where should they go to learn more about Datashapes?
Yeah, so our website, datashapesai.com. Or hit Kevin and I up on LinkedIn. We're big LinkedIn users, so we're always available.
Yeah. Awesome. Guys, thank you for your service to the country in all of its forms. It's awesome to see what you're doing out here. Looking forward to following along on the journey, and we'll have you back here as you guys continue to grow in the future.
Perfect. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.